Yeah, you know what time it is. Time to talk about power creep. Thank you to our $5 patron, Sinus Lancelot, and a big thank you to our $25 patron, the Mr. Greed. Before we have this breakdown of Percival's gang of friends and how they could hypothetically still stay relevant in this turbulent new metagame, please do me a favor, leave your own thoughts on how they can stay relevant, or if you even believe they're going to stay relevant, in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, please do me a favor. I got a Patreon down below, and I'd appreciate any support you're willing to give. Now, let's get into it. What's up, guys? I got a pencil here, and here we are to discuss the fate of our cast. And by our cast, you know who I'm mainly talking about. I'm talking about Nasiens, Drippy Lord, and the Princess of Truth, and Donny, the Lost Knight. So let's get into that. Because here's the thing. Regardless, no matter what, Percy's going to stay relevant. Let's be completely real. Percy, he's one of the four knights. He's confirmed that. We know Lancelot is going to stay relevant. He's one of the characters from the previous series. Well, no, the child of the character from the previous series. He's already been introduced. He's going to be relevant. That's it. Like, we don't have to worry about those two. However, we do really need to worry about Nasiens and Donny. Because here's the thing, right? I'm not saying these guys don't have any potential to grow, get stronger, get better, get faster. And who knows? They could very easily keep up with the entire rest of the knights. Because it seems like maybe the other knights won't have any groups if only Tristan's already confirmed to be a knight. Lance is already confirmed to be a knight. And, well, Lance isn't confirmed, but he's confirmed. And then Percival's already confirmed to be a knight. So we already have 3 out of the 4 knights broken down, locked in. And I feel like, who knows, Gawain or whoever the 4th knight is, whether it be Diane and King's Kid or somebody else, they aren't likely to have their own group either. I don't think Nakaba would do that, at least not this late into the narrative, especially since he seems to be, like, picking up the pace. I don't think he's going to do that. So mainly we have to worry about the characters that we've established so far. And here's the thing, right? Looking on the pessimistic but realistic side, it's okay for them to go. Because it's not like all of their arcs are necessarily over. Like, Nasien's whole background is still a complete mystery to us. We don't know where he came from. We know he came from Echo Gorge, quote unquote. But as Ordo says, he just popped up one day. Like the man doesn't have an origin story, so there's still that entire background. You have the whole mystery surrounding Anne's family and what happened to her mom and how she died, where she died. Like, apparently it was a traitor, stuff like that. There's a whole storyline back there that we still don't know the full details of. But obviously, Anne's direct bloodline is tied into Camelot somehow, some way. So, of course, her narrative keep going on from here. And Donny, despite having not the most in-depth narrative, he still could keep up with the gang in terms of just relative abilities and possibly developing his own story arcs, getting over his cowardice, because he still does have a little bit of that, and it could definitely still go away. And obviously, having a character that's linked to Leonis already would be good for our cast. Though, admittedly, I have to say, Donny, he has, like, it's sad to say, but he has, like, the least tie-in to the past, unless his mom ends up being some Camelot noble or something like that. But we know that's not the case, or his dad or something like that. Like, because we don't know who Donny's father is. We have no clue about that. So unless something comes of that, and there we go. That's 3 storylines for all of them. Donny's father and whatever history that comes from, maybe the origin of his telekinesis magic. Nasiens with his whole mystery background, and with her whole ties to Camelot. There are stories that Nakaba could very well tell with this cast. Well, he has gone through some character arcs for them, some character development for them already, and given them this nice solid 50-ish chapters to, establish themselves as a group and exist so far. So it technically, it's weird to say, but it would be legally fine to just quietly shove them under a rug and we just never talk about them again. It's perfectly fine to do that, but I don't want that to happen. And I think the best way Nakaba can keep them relevant is to double down on what makes them unique, right? Because what I noticed that Nakaba did with this cast in comparison to the cast that got booed to the side, and what I mean by that is the general Holy Knight cast from last series, is that he very specifically specified them and specialize them to certain roles that I don't think any of the other knights could really easily replicate. Though it's still possible that they could, which is the big issue, right? Because here's the thing. Nasien's poison ability and the ability to give out buffs, debuffs, copy other affecting abilities, anything like that, that's super unique to him. Poison Mixer is a really powerful ability. And obviously, I don't think anyone else could easily mimic that unless it's like Diane and King's Kid, who would have some manner of control over nature and who knows could mimic those effects, but not to the same degree that Nasiens could. And then you take a look at someone like Donny. Telekinesis isn't necessarily the most uncommon thing. So let's be real, Merlin had telekinesis. And it seems like a lot of characters can develop at least a substitute for telekinesis, whether that be, oh lord, Fairies had telekinesis too, and Lancelot's obviously a big telekinesis user, or well, he could be if he developed telekinesis. I didn't put that in the Lancelot video. I forgot Fairies can levitate things. But that's another thing he could possibly do. So Lancelot could replace Donny on that front, and that's a little bit concerning. And then Anne, her ability, at least but even then, that's the thing, like, Lancelot, I just realized, stole like a whole ton of things. Well, at least from two of our side characters. He has the ability to, he already has an ability that, in my opinion, can be superior to Anne's. Like, just flat out superior. Because while Anne relies on someone lying and being able to tell, she doesn't have clear instructions on what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Lancelot can just straight up read their mind. So, Anne kind of in trouble. However, I feel like the way you compensate for every last one of these and keep them super specialized is by having them, once again, like I said, double down. Having Nakaba double down onto their unique stuff and keeping them relevant that way. So if you want to keep Donny in the narrative, have his telekinesis develop fully and more, like almost, this is going to sound bad, but like I'm talking some Marvel stuff, like you're able to levitate yourself, levitate other objects, catch objects, like expand his range. Essentially, it's going to sound weird, turn Donny into maybe less of a telekinesis user and more of a gravity user, right? So he'd be able to start redirecting attacks, throwing attacks around, and things that aren't his, notably. Because notably, fairies, while they can use telekinesis on other creatures, they don't use it too often, and they don't necessarily use it on attacks too often. But imagine Donny growing and amping himself so where he's able to grab something like a plume of Hellblaze and then spin it around himself and throw it back at somebody else, like increasing momentum, throwing it around, almost like not necessarily a full counter, because full counter doubles the effects of something, but a reversal. And that can make him unique from Lancelot, because Lancelot hasn't shown the levitation ability just yet, because who knows, he could very easily develop that. But on top of that, he could keep unique from Lancelot, because while Lancelot, due to only being a half fairy, could only levitate things that are related or controlled by him, Donny could have full power to control everything in the environment. And this includes his friends. Like, say, instead of Percy lifting everyone up in his big magic spear, Donny could be the person that allows everyone to fly about. He could become like a telekinesis maestro, where he's controlling people and setting them around, kind of like he did against Elgin, where he lifted his friends back up and then they attacked. Except now he's controlling them, helping guide their force, guide their speed, all that. I think that's how you keep Donny relevant. Just have him go super deep in telekinesis. I want him to do nuts. I want to be blown away by what Donny can do, because the thing is, he can essentially my apologies. He can essentially do whatever his uncle could do, but hypothetically better, right? Because he could have the whole vortexes of telekinesis, except you wouldn't be able to tell, because it wouldn't be wind to feel. You'd literally just be getting jerked around. So I think that's perfectly fine. And then for Anne, she's difficult. She's very, very difficult because of her true seeing ability, not necessarily being you have to make it so it's immune to like Gotha level stuff. Like, that's the only way you can keep Anne relevant. She has to be the only person that's entirely immune to any sort of mind hacks. That's the only way you evolve her power. Because the thing is, her power is essentially the ability to tell if someone's lying or not, or to see through some physical illusions that we've seen so far. However, Lancelot could also do that by just reading the mind of somebody. Like, if you were to swap out Lancelot in the same situation that Anne was against someone like Bergie, Lance would be like, all right, that one's empty, that one's empty, that one's empty, that one has thoughts and it wants to stab me. Let's do that. Like, he would be able to see through the exact same thing. So to keep Anne specialized away from Lance, all you need to do is make her power, one, able to see through all illusions, whether they be internal, external, all that. Like, the eyes of truth are essentially a fundamental part of her being, unless she can see through all that. So she'd be the one to break the group out of illusions and stuff like that and stop it in case any of Arthur's knights suddenly have mind hacks. And two, I'd say, while Lancelot can use his mind reading to somewhat predict what a person is going to do, like he can read someone's mind and be like, okay, they're going to kick here. And while Lancelot may have the 50-50 of what leg they're going to kick with, like he may, like who knows, maybe he could have kicked down the wrong leg of Fittich and then gotten kicked by the other one. But in terms, Anne would essentially have the true sight, the perfect understanding of what someone could do, essentially perfect precog. I know that doesn't necessarily fit with the truth ideal perfectly. Mind reading works more for that, but I think developing the idea that she can see the truth of anybody and seeing the true path of someone's combat would be a great way to keep her relevant, even if not in a combat sense, because I do think she does have the sword skill, but everyone's going to be likely to catch up to her. We've already seen, that's the weird thing, we've already seen characters like Nasiens, Donny, and Percival, not really, but still, those two already have comparable skill, and I'm assuming, no offense to Anne, but I'm guessing Lancelot would have superior skill if he were to pick up a blade. But to be fair, he doesn't wield blades, so maybe not. But at least in terms of weapon skill, I think that'll be very quickly power creeped out of the narrative. Like, remember, actually, no, now that I think about it, the Prime Demon King also used the sword. And Arthur does have Excalibur. So, as long as Anne keeps specializing in the blade and then develops the ability to see into the future, essentially see what someone's true path in combat will be, she can be useful on a direct combat front and on a passive combat front by guiding her allies around. By being like, watch out, they're going to swing, like stuff like that. I think that would be very, very cool and keep her relevant, separate from Lancelot. And finally, we have Nasiens. I think Nasiens is the easiest person to keep relevant because even if King and Diane's kid, who for some reason we still don't have revealed, like Nakaba, I get it. King and Diane were not as popular as Meliodas and Elizabeth and or Bond, but nah. Okay, question to you. Who out there likes Elaine more than they like King? Who out there likes Elaine more than they like Diane? Because it's not me. I mean, and that's no offense to it. It's not like Elaine's a bad character or anything, but then again, Bond does carry. Bond carries very, very hard in that regard. So I get it. But geez, Nakaba, could you introduce their kid? But regardless, I could definitely see the poison mixer ability being overridden and copied by King and Diane's kid, because they could have a pseudo form of disaster where they could pop up a plant that mimics any effects. Meanwhile, I think Nasien's the easiest way to stay relevant is just literally have him be the group medic. Technically Percival's group medic too. I'll talk about Percival a little bit in this video because he's kind of insane. But again, I'm gonna make his own potential video, what he could do and where his magic could go. But what you have Nasiens do is essentially be the person who is always there, just out haxing the opponent, and annoyingly so too. With Wither, with other types of magic, keep introducing magics that Nasiens can get his hands on and steal. Wither was a great example of poison mixture being used perfectly, where he just intakes some poison, figures it out, recomposes it, and then spits it back out. Have Nasiens essentially get used to ingesting his own poisons too, because while the physical weakness of Nasiens is something that's been noted a couple times, you could have him consistently counteract that by just rebuffing himself. Say he gets used to the Serenos horn, or say he starts combining poisons effectively. Like I said, Nasiens, you had an energy buff potion built into your DNA. I know you didn't know what it would do if combined with the Serenos horn, but at the same time, in a situation like that, you should have popped that out. If you want Nasiens to stay relevant, you gotta have him essentially be the group support that is constantly buffing, debuffing, moving around. And I think the great thing about Nasiens is that he's kind of unique in terms of anything we've seen Seven Deadly Sins wise, because admittedly, a character with a lot of telekinetic or psychic control and stuff like that, you can kind of get that in the original Seven Deadly Sins through darkness matter manipulation with a lot of the demons. Merlin was a big telekinesis user. King was a big telekinesis user, obviously. You have a lot of those. So Donny isn't necessarily too special, but he could be more special if you double down on it. Anne's power is pretty unique, but a lot of that can be replicated by sheer battle skill and battle IQ, which a lot of the characters in Seven Deadly Sins had in spades. Meanwhile, the role that Nasiens would play is essentially not covered by anyone. The only time I think our sins got buffed was right at the very end with Power Limit Break, which was by Merlin. But of course, that was not natural and had made unnatural side effects. Meanwhile, Nasiens could essentially buff, debuff, move around. He could be the support that never really existed in the Seven Deadly Sins world. And if anything, if I had to sacrifice two to keep one, this is no offense to Anne and Donny, but they're gonna have to go if I keep Nasiens relevant, because I just think he has the most potential to be interesting, right? Because as cool as I think Donny could be, and as cool as I think him doubling down could be, he could definitely be replaced by Percival. Not gonna lie. As cool as I think Anne's possible evolution abilities could be, can definitely be replaced by Lancelot. Those two have direct substitutes, and who knows? Nasiens could very easily be replaced by King Diane's kid if they are one of the knights. The more and more I learn about Gawain, the less and less I think they're going to get the pleasure of being one of the four knights. But at the same time, I'm holding out hope. But obviously, Nasiens could be replaced by there. But I think it's harder to get rid of Nasiens, and specifically what Nasiens does, than it is to get rid of Donny and Anne. So hopefully Nakaba doesn't do it. I'm hoping. And that's really about it for those three, because that's the thing. Those are the only three we're worried about. We aren't worried about Percival. We aren't worried about Lance. But hypothetically, say we were. worried about Percival, right? Because here's the thing, right? Percival obviously has, Percival obviously has insane potential, out of this world potential. We've seen the man's died twice and essentially come back way stronger. He's obviously just a different breed. However, what is clearly established in chapter 48 and onward is that Lance is just a different breed. And if Tristan has been training all these years, and he already beat Lance in the past, and to be fair, a lot has changed. Lance has had chaos training. Meanwhile, Tristan has been, we don't know the whereabouts of Tristan until his movie drops. And I still need to react to that, though. I saw it, and I didn't react to that whole Tristan PV or whatever trailer thing, because they want to hurl. But in actuality, if Tristan's been training and having his own adventures, he's also going to be mad buff. Like, no offense to Elaine and Bond, but being the grandson of the literal deities of two of the strongest, if not just flat out the strongest species in Seven Deadly Sins, you're gonna be insane, alright? Like, these things just happen. So what I'm mainly worried about Percival is that he's gonna have some leaps to do in terms of training and raw power, right? Because a big reason why I believe Lance skipped the narrative so far, and by Lance I mean Nakaba has skipped the narrative so far, is that even he realized, like, whoa, we can't do the villain of the week anymore. Because if we do, with Lancelot here, it's just going to be a Lancelot solo show, and it ain't going to be the best. So we can't have that keep going. So by doing that, he's essentially revealed that even Percival, our MC, is way far behind. And it's something that never really happened in Seven Deadly Sins, except you could argue Escanor is the only time this really happened, but it didn't even last that long, if we're being completely real. Like, the only time our MC, in the case, I'm going to say it's Meliodas. I've heard arguments that Elizabeth is the MC, but Nakaba himself literally calls Seven Deadly Sins Meliodas' story, so do what you will with that. But, like, the only time Meliodas was power crept so hard that he, like, literally had to make an insane leap in power was when Escanor was by his own allies, by the way, not necessarily by the enemies. Enemies being way stronger is something that's just a natural part of the narrative. You want our enemies to grow unless you're telling like a One Punch Man style narrative. The only time Meliodas was out-crept so hard was when early commanders were introduced, and then Escanor was introduced as the seventh sin. But the thing is, Nakaba had a good excuse to get around that insane power creep by having Meliodas' power being sealed away and having that plot point already be built up earlier on in the narrative. Meanwhile, the only plot point that we have for Percival to make massive, insane gains in a short period of time is death. And while, see, I don't want to spoil Bleach, but there's a certain character in Bleach that also has something related to death that makes them get stronger every single time. And there is a section of the narrative where the author abuses that. I don't think Nakaba's going to do that. For those who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And do I think that Lance is going to repeatedly stab Percival to bring him close to death and have him keep re-upping himself until he's super strong, or at least as strong as Lance? No, I don't think that's going to happen. If that does happen, that'd be metal. But regardless, I think the best way you can have Percival keep up is, like, it's going to sound weird after what I just said, but organically keep near-deathing him. Like, say the moment he gets back, the king of Meliodas is like, "Aye, my boy, I like your cut, I like your drip. I don't know, that boy Nasiens over there, he looking a bit more drippy than you. However, you are one of the four knights, so you need to get more swole, my boy. Look at my nephew right here, Lance. Check out the gains. He's got the gun show out here, even before guns were invented. He's just that dude. And you won't even want to see my son. Man's got chaos magic on deck. He won't be boxing with Arthur in about 2 weeks. Just wait for it. However, you, my boy, you still lower than Holy Knight level? My boy, I was Holy Knight level at the age of 5, bro. Come on, I popped out my mama with a power level of 400. Level with me real quick, bro. Get your gains up. Like, that's what if Meliodas really does that, I think he will just send them out and be like, "Alright, keep fighting. Come back when you're stronger." That's not gonna happen, though. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think the most likely scenario for all of our cast to maintain relevancy, if not through these, like, organic power growths or doubling down that Nakaba could do, is trading. That's the simplest thing. Like, if Nakaba does want to keep the whole cast relevant, which I think he will, I don't think this is different than the Holy Knight situation. I don't think it would make sense for Nakaba to spend so much time on these characters only for them to just boom, RKO'd right out of the narrative. I don't think that's going to happen. So hypothetically, I do think now that we're back in Leonis, now that we do have access to resources that we didn't have before, such as King Meliodas, Goddess Elizabeth, That's about it. Like, unless I'm not sure if Bon and Elaine are still in Benwick, but it's entirely possible that they can come to visit pretty easily. We obviously know they have access to teleportation beads, and we know Lance should be able to get himself back home to grab his dad if need be. So we don't know the whereabouts of the rest of the city. We don't go through exit. Like, there's so many ways that the cast can be trained by our previous cast in order to stay relevant. So Nakaba, crossing my fingers, crossing my toes of my toes. Don't ask questions. Please keep everyone relevant. don't just shun them out of the narrative. So overall, I'd have to say, though, the main ways you keep our main characters relevant is by tying them into the narratives that they have already have established, whether it be the mystery narratives. So that's how you keep them involved on the narrative front without falling out of interest. And then to keep them relevant on the power front, simply double down, completely go deep into what makes those characters and unique, and have them explode in variety. As Nakaba has very clearly showed in Seven Deadly Sins, your magic can do a whole ton of things. That's one of the benefits of having a soft magic system like Seven Deadly Sins. You can go essentially nuts. So Nakaba, from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my care for Nasiens as one of my favorite characters, please don't write him out of the narrative. I do greatly appreciate that. However, those are my thoughts. Do you have any ideas of what powers that the gang could develop to stay relevant? Do you want them to stay relevant? Do you want us to just completely skip over them now and go to the four knights? Do you want a sort of mix of both, where they're not necessarily relevant power-wise or magic ability-wise, but they're relevant character-wise? Do you want the opposite? I don't know. Please tell me in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you guys know that there's a notification bell down below. And also, I do have a Patreon. I'd appreciate any support you're willing to give. Thank you guys once again. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil, writing off.